Hello, dear listeners, and welcome to another cozy bedtime story from Dreamy Sleep Tales. Tonight, as the gentle patter of rain soothes your mind and eases you into tranquility, let us step into a world of quiet streets, glistening cobblestones, and a warm, inviting cafe that glows like a beacon of comfort in the dim, rainy night. Settle in, relax, and let your imagination carry you to this special place where weary souls find solace, friendship, and the promise of new beginnings. Rain drummed softly against the rooftops of a small town, each droplet reflecting the faint shimmer of the streetlights. The hour was late, well past the time when most of the townsfolk would have turned off their lights and retired for the night. Yet, the traveler, exhausted from a long day's journey, found themselves wandering through the winding streets, guided by the warm glow of a sign that read "Cafe" in bright, welcoming letters. The traveler's footsteps echoed gently on the wet pavement, mingling with the steady sound of rainfall. The traveler's coat was soaked, shoes damp, and shoulders weary. With each step, they searched for any sign of refuge, a place to rest, to find something warm to drink, and perhaps exchange a few kind words with a stranger. At last, they spotted it, a little cafe, its sign shining against the night, promising shelter from the rain and a friendly light in the darkness. A vintage blue car, parked near the entrance, reflected the cafe's golden glow on its rain-speckled surface. Beyond the car, a bicycle leaned against the cafe's outer wall, as if left there by someone who had hurried in from the downpour. Outside, the cafe's window revealed a soft, inviting interior. Lamps glowed with a gentle hue, casting warm shadows that danced on the wooden walls. The traveler paused, hand on the door, feeling a subtle shift in the atmosphere, as though the night itself were guiding them to this very spot. Something about this place seemed timeless, an oasis amid the storm, a sanctuary hidden away in a corner of the world. With a gentle push, the traveler opened the door. A small bell chimed, announcing their arrival to anyone within. The immediate sensation was one of comfort. The warmth of the air, The quiet hum of conversations and the soothing aroma of freshly brewed tea and coffee. Rainwater dripped from the traveler's coat onto the floor, forming a small puddle that sparkled under the cafe's soft lights. In the corner, a record player played a mellow tune, something that harmonized seamlessly with the rhythm of raindrops outside. Wooden tables, each with a single flower in a small vase, dotted the interior. A few patrons, each wrapped in their own quiet world, turned to look at the newcomer, offering polite, friendly nods. The traveler breathed a quiet sigh of relief. They had found exactly what they needed. Behind the counter stood the cafe owner, an older individual with kind eyes and a gentle smile. They wore a simple apron, the pockets stuffed with bits of paper, pens, and other small necessities for running a cozy establishment. The owner's hair was streaked with silver, lending them a wise and comforting air, as though they had listened to countless stories in this very place over many years. "Welcome," the owner said, voice soft and inviting. "You look like you've been caught in the rain. Please, come in and warm up." The traveler smiled, offering a slight nod of gratitude. The owner gestured to an empty stool at the counter, and the traveler obliged, removing their coat and hanging it on a nearby rack to dry. From behind the counter, the owner produced a steaming mug of tea. The fragrance was an enticing blend of chamomile and subtle spices, calming from the very first breath. "This one's on the house," the owner insisted. "I know what it's like to arrive in this town for the first time, weary from a long journey. Sometimes a warm drink can do wonders." The traveler wrapped their hands around the mug, letting the heat seep into their fingers. They took a tentative sip, finding it to be exactly what their body and mind craved. As the warmth spread through them, the traveler glanced around the cafe, taking in the details. The wooden shelves lined with books and jars of loose-leaf teas. The chalkboard menu listing an assortment of coffees, pastries, and sandwiches. But more than the physical details, the traveler felt the intangible warmth of the place, a sense of belonging that settled around them like a comforting blanket. "I am grateful," the traveler said softly. "I've been on the road for what feels like forever. It's nice to find a place that's open at this hour." The owner smiled. "This cafe never truly closes. People need a haven, especially when the rain comes down like this. It's an old tradition in this town. There's always someone awake, always a light shining for those who wander in the night. A soft thunder rolled outside, punctuating the traveler's first moments of respite. Another patron, sitting a few seats away, glanced up from their book and offered a gentle nod. The cafe was not crowded, just a handful of night owls, each absorbed in their own thoughts. But the traveler sensed an undercurrent of shared warmth, as if every person there understood the importance of this place and its quiet magic. Curious about the history of the cafe, the traveler looked to the owner. How long has this place been here? It feels timeless somehow. The owner chuckled, resting their hands on the counter. Longer than I've been alive, that's for sure. My grandparents used to run this place. Back then, it was just a small shop, a gathering spot for folks who wanted to escape the rain or share a story or two. Over the decades, we expanded. We added more tables, more lights, and even a small stage for local musicians on weekends. But the heart of the place remained the same. The traveler leaned in, intrigued. And what heart is that? Listening, the owner replied with a tender smile. People come here with all sorts of burdens, dreams, and worries. They might sit quietly, or they might strike up a conversation with someone they've never met. By the time they leave, they've shared a piece of themselves and taken with them a piece of comfort. That's the heart of this cafe. A place where stories converge and strangers become friends, even if only for a moment. The traveler nodded, taking another sip of tea. Outside, the wind sighed, and rain streaked down the windows. The traveler felt a tingle of anticipation, as though something significant was about to happen, or perhaps was already happening. The warmth of the tea, the hush of the cafe, and the steady background music all melded into a serene lullaby that calmed the traveler's racing thoughts. As the traveler savored their drink, the door to the cafe chimed again. In walked a young man, water dripping from his jacket onto the floor. He quickly closed the door behind him, removing his cap and shaking off the excess raindrops. He seemed hesitant at first, scanning the room for a friendly face. The owner greeted him just as warmly as they had greeted the traveler. "Welcome back, Adrian," the owner said, pulling a towel from beneath the counter. "The usual seat tonight?" Adrian nodded, a faint smile crossing his lips. He took the towel, dried his face and hands, and slid into a seat near the traveler. With a polite nod, he introduced himself. Name's Adrian. Didn't expect to see anyone new here this late. I just arrived in town, the traveler replied, returning the smile. I'm grateful this place is open. The rain seems determined to keep everyone indoors. Adrian shrugged out of his jacket and let the owner hang it up to dry. You've come to the right spot. This cafe is my refuge on nights like this. Whenever I can't sleep or need a moment to think, I find myself drawn here. The traveler felt a quiet sense of camaraderie in Adrian's presence. Though they were strangers, there was no awkwardness in their conversation. Instead, they shared an unspoken understanding that this cafe was special, a safe harbor for those who wandered in from the rain, seeking comfort and companionship. Adrian ordered a mug of hot chocolate, complete with a swirl of whipped cream on top. The owner served it with a grin. Don't stay out too late tonight, the owner teased. You've got an early morning shift, don't you? I do, Adrian replied, stirring his drink. But something told me I should stop by. Maybe it was the thunder or the restlessness I felt when I tried to sleep. I don't know. I just needed a place to think. A few moments later, the door chimed once more, and in walked an older woman carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. She was greeted by name as well, and she, too, chose a seat near the traveler. Before long, the traveler realized that each patron who entered was welcomed as if they were part of a family bound not by blood, but by shared stories and gentle acceptance. As the evening wore on, the owner lit a few more candles to chase away the gloom of the rainy night. The golden flicker illuminated the cafe, reflecting off the windows where droplets still clung to the glass. The quiet murmur of conversation filled the space. Polite inquiries about one another's day, musings on the weather, and whispered confessions of hopes and fears. The traveler, feeling more at ease, ventured a question. Is there a story behind that car parked out front? It looks quite vintage. Adrian chimed in with a grin. That's the owner's prized possession. It belonged to their grandparents. A little piece of history. The owner laughed softly, wiping down the counter. It's been in my family for ages. It's seen more roads than I can count. Nowadays, I don't drive it much, but I keep it around because it reminds me of simpler times when my grandparents would load up the trunk with fresh pastries and drive around town, delivering them to neighbors. The traveler pictured the vintage car rumbling down the old roads of the town, the trunk filled with warm bread and cakes. The image brought a sense of nostalgia, even though the traveler had never witnessed it personally. It was as if the cafe's memories were becoming part of the traveler's own memories, woven together by the gentle hush of the night and the shared comfort of a warm drink. In a corner booth, the older woman with the wild flowers carefully arranged them in a small vase. She caught the traveler's eye and smiled. "They're for my late husband," she explained softly, her voice tinged with fondness. "I like to bring him flowers on rainy nights, place them in the cafe, and remember the times we spent here together. He loved the rain, said it made him feel alive." The traveler nodded, touched by the sentiment. The flowers seemed to brighten the corner of the cafe, a subtle reminder that even in the darkest nights, beauty could flourish. The longer the traveler stayed, the more they realized that each person in the cafe had a story to share, a dream they were chasing, a memory they cherished, or a sorrow they were gently cradling in their heart. At one table, a young artist sketched by candlelight, capturing the soft shadows of the cafe's interior. At another, a couple sat hand in hand, speaking in low tones about the future they were planning together. At one point, the owner approached the traveler carrying a small plate of pastries. "These are fresh out of the oven," they said, offering a comforting smile. Apple turnovers with just a hint of cinnamon. On nights like this, a bit of sweetness can lift the spirit. The traveler thanked them and took a bite. The pastry was flaky and warm, the apple filling sweet but not overpowering. It reminded the traveler of childhood, of cozy kitchens and gentle lullabies sung by a loved one. The traveler closed their eyes for a moment, letting the taste transport them to simpler times. When the traveler opened their eyes, they noticed Adrian watching them with a knowing grin. "Good, isn't it?" he asked, sipping his hot chocolate. The owner's pastries are famous around here. It's wonderful, the traveler replied. I didn't realize how hungry I was until now. Adrian nodded. Funny how we forget the little things, like hunger, when we're caught up in our worries or travels. Sometimes it takes a warm meal in a welcoming place to remind us that life's simple comforts are worth cherishing. The traveler felt a surge of gratitude for this moment. Here, in this softly lit cafe, it was easy to forget the stresses of the outside world. The only sounds were the gentle murmur of conversation, the distant roll of thunder, and the patter of rain on the window. Everything else, the demands of work, the obligations of daily life, seemed to fade into the background. As midnight approached, the conversation among the patrons shifted. People began sharing personal anecdotes, memories of lost loved ones, and aspirations they held for the future. The traveler listened intently, finding comfort and wisdom in each story. Even the quiet ones, who initially seemed shy or reserved, found themselves contributing a sentence or two, as though the ambience of the cafe invited openness. Adrian recounted how he had grown up in a neighboring town, dreaming of becoming a musician. But life had other plans, he said with a wry smile. Now I work at a bookstore. I can't complain though. I'm surrounded by stories all day, and when I come here, I feel like I am part of another story, one that's being written in real time by all of us. The traveler nodded, intrigued. Have you ever considered playing music here? I noticed there's a small stage in the corner. Adrian glanced at the stage, where a single microphone stood, draped in shadows. I have thought about it, but I guess I've always been afraid. It's one thing to dream in private. It's another to put yourself out there for everyone to see. Before the traveler could respond, the older woman with the wildflowers offered her own perspective. Sometimes, sharing our dreams is the only way they can grow. My husband used to say that a dream hidden away is like a seed left in a drawer. It'll never bloom if it doesn't see the light. Adrian smiled at the wisdom in her words. Perhaps I'll give it a try one of these days. The traveler felt a stirring in their own heart. They too carried dreams that had been tucked away, perhaps out of fear or uncertainty. Listening to Adrian, they began to wonder if the cafe's magic might encourage them to step out of their comfort zone as well. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming on the cafe's roof in a steady rhythm. The wind picked up, rattling the window panes, but inside, the glow of the lamps and the warmth of companionship kept the storm at bay. The traveler took a moment to simply listen to the rainfall, to the hushed voices, to the soft clink of cups against saucers. It was as if the world outside had faded, leaving only this cozy haven behind. Noticing the traveler's contemplative silence, the cafe owner approached. "Is the tea still warm enough?" they asked, refilling the traveler's cup without waiting for an answer. Sometimes, on nights like this, people find themselves remembering things they thought they'd forgotten. The traveler nodded, thanking the owner for the refill. It's true. There's something about the sound of rain that brings back old memories, both the happy and the sad. The owner smiled sympathetically. That's the rain's gift in a way. It washes away the dust we've allowed to settle on our minds. It can bring clarity if we let it. The traveler thought about the road that had led them here, the twists and turns of life that had guided them to this little cafe in a town they'd never visited before. It felt like destiny, as though they were meant to pause here, to rest, to listen, and perhaps to discover something new about themselves. In a lull between conversations, Adrian suddenly stood up, setting his mug aside. He glanced at the stage and took a deep breath. "Owner," he called, voice tinged with a mixture of nerves and excitement. "Could I maybe try playing something on that old guitar you keep behind the counter?" A ripple of surprise and support passed through the cafe. The owner smiled broadly. "Of course. You know it's there for anyone who wants to share a tune." Adrian walked over to the counter and the owner handed him a well-worn acoustic guitar. It had a few scratches on its surface, and the strings looked like they'd seen better days, but it still possessed a certain charm, much like the cafe itself. With tentative steps, Adrian made his way to the small stage. He plugged in the guitar, tested a chord or two, and cleared his throat. The cafe fell silent, every patron turning their attention to him. The traveler could feel Adrian's apprehension, but also the quiet support radiating from everyone in the room. Adrian began to strum a gentle melody. It was simple, yet hauntingly beautiful, evoking images of moonlit roads and softly falling rain. As he played, his initial nervousness seemed to melt away, replaced by a calm confidence. The traveler found themselves swaying slightly to the rhythm, lulled by the soothing notes. After a moment, Adrian's voice joined the guitar, tender and earnest. He sang of dreams left unspoken, of nights spent awake with thoughts swirling in his mind, and of a small beacon of light, a cafe that offered shelter to anyone seeking warmth in the storm. His lyrics were raw, unpolished, but deeply heartfelt. When he finished, the last chord hung in the air, blending with the distant rumble of thunder. The cafe erupted in gentle applause. The older woman, with the wildflowers dabbed at her eyes, smiling proudly. The traveler too felt tears prick at the corners of their eyes. It was as if Adrian's song had given voice to every silent longing in the room. Adrian exhaled, a shaky smile spreading across his face. "Thank you," he said softly, stepping down from the stage. The cafe buzzed with quiet excitement after Adrian's performance. A couple of patrons approached him, offering words of encouragement. The older woman with the wildflowers pressed a single bloom into his hand, whispering something the traveler couldn't quite hear, but which made Adrian smile warmly. Returning to his seat beside the traveler, Adrian let out a sigh of relief. "I can't believe I just did that," he said, shaking his head. "I've dreamed of playing in front of people for so long, but I never found the courage." The traveler placed a reassuring hand on Adrian's shoulder. "You were wonderful. You have a real gift," he smiled, glancing around at the cafe. "This place, it has a way of making you feel safe enough to share what's in your heart." The traveler nodded in agreement. "It really does." As the night stretched on, the conversations turned to more introspective topics: ambitions for the future, regrets from the past, and the subtle changes people hoped to make in their lives. Some shared stories of unspoken love. Others spoke of creative projects they had abandoned. And still others whispered dreams they had never dared to voice aloud before. In the midst of these discussions, the traveler felt an unexpected sense of unity with the people around them. Though they came from different walks of life, each had arrived at the cafe carrying a spark of hope or a hidden ache. Through the simple act of sharing, Whether it was music, memories, or the comfort of a warm drink, they were forming a community, if only for this single rainy night. Around 2 in the morning, the cafe owner took a moment to step from behind the counter and join the group at one of the tables. They brought with them a tattered scrapbook, edges yellowed with age, and placed it in the center for everyone to see. I thought you might like to learn a bit more about this place, the owner said, flipping through the pages. The scrapbook contained old photographs, sepia-toned images of the cafe's exterior from decades ago, group photos of regular patrons, and newspaper clippings announcing small-town events. One photograph showed the cafe's original owners, beaming proudly in front of a modest storefront. Another captured a night much like this one, a rain-soaked street, a few people huddled under umbrellas, and a soft light glowing through the windows. Handwritten notes accompanied some of the photos, detailing the names of patrons who had found solace here over the years. This place was always meant to be more than just a business, the owner explained, tapping a finger on a photograph of their grandparents. They believed in the power of community, that a single light in the darkness can guide lost souls home. Over time, it became a tradition that the cafe would never turn away a weary traveler. It's a promise I've tried to uphold. The traveler felt a lump in their throat. They could see the echoes of the past overlapping with the present. Countless individuals finding shelter from life's storms within these walls. Each page of the scrapbook told a new story of friendships forged, love discovered, and personal transformations that began with a simple cup of tea and a kind word. A hush fell over the group as they turned the pages, absorbing the cafe's history. The older woman who brought the wildflowers pointed to a photograph of a small gathering. "That's me and my husband," she said, voice trembling with emotion. "We were so young then. We'd just gotten engaged, and this cafe was where we celebrated. It's also where we came to mourn when we lost our first child, and later where we rejoiced when we had our second. So many memories within these walls." The traveler listened with a quiet reverence. They felt the weight of those memories, the tapestry of countless lives woven into this one place. It was as though the cafe itself was alive, a living testament to the hopes, sorrows, and dreams of the town. Another patron pointed to a clipping about a local poetry night. "I remember that evening," they said with a wistful smile. "I read my first poem here. My hands were shaking so badly, but the applause at the end was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard." Even Adrian found a photograph of himself as a teenager, standing in the background during a community fundraiser. He let out a soft chuckle. "I had no idea someone had taken this picture. I remember being so shy, barely speaking to anyone." The cafe owner gently closed the scrapbook, placing a hand on the worn cover. "Each of you has added to this story," they said. "And tonight, you're continuing that legacy." A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, making a few candles flicker dangerously. One flame went out, plunging a small corner of the cafe into darkness. The owner calmly retrieved a lighter, relit the candle, and the soft glow returned. The traveler was struck by the simplicity of the act. Darkness can come unexpectedly, but with a little spark, warmth and light are restored. The traveler excused themselves for a moment to gaze out the window. The street outside was nearly empty, save for the reflection of the cafe's neon sign shimmering in the puddles. The vintage blue car and the bicycle still stood sentry. The traveler realized how silent the town had become. It was as though the entire world was asleep, except for the few souls gathered here, sheltered by the cafe's glow. In that stillness, the traveler felt a wave of gratitude. For the first time in a long while, they were not consumed by worry or haste. Instead, they felt present, connected, and oddly hopeful. Perhaps this stop was more than just a break from the rain. Perhaps it was a gentle nudge from fate, urging them to reconsider their path and to listen to the quiet yearnings of their own heart. Time seemed to flow differently inside the cafe, unbound by the usual constraints of schedules and deadlines. One by one, some of the patrons gathered their belongings and prepared to leave, braving the diminishing rain. Each farewell was accompanied by warm wishes and promises to return. Even though the cafe never truly closed, the approach of dawn signaled a shift, a reminder that a new day was about to begin. Adrian, stifling a yawn, stood up and stretched. "I should go," he said, a note of regret in his voice. "I have work in a few hours, The traveler shook his hand. Thank you for sharing your music. It was an honor to witness your first performance here. He grinned, cheeks reddening slightly. I'm glad I finally did it. I hope to see you again someday. Maybe I'll have a new song ready. After Adrian left, only a few patrons remained, including the older woman with the wildflowers, who sat quietly sipping her tea. She gave the traveler a knowing smile. Nights like this remind us that life is a series of small miracles, don't they? The traveler nodded, taking a moment to reflect. The wind outside had calmed, and the rain had slowed to a soft drizzle. The darkness of the night was beginning to give way to the pale light of dawn, which crept along the horizon in gentle, rose-colored hues. As the first hint of morning light touched the windows, the traveler realized they felt renewed, like a flower that had been watered after a long drought. The burdens they had carried into the cafe didn't seem so heavy anymore. Their mind felt clear, and a subtle excitement stirred within them, as though new possibilities were unfolding. The cafe owner, noticing the traveler's pensive look, approached with a smile. You've been quiet for a while? Is everything all right? Yes, the traveler replied, voice soft. I think I just needed a night like this to slow down, to listen, and to remember that life can be gentle. The owner nodded. Sometimes the greatest journey we take is the one inward, toward understanding ourselves. If this cafe helped you take even a small step in that direction, then I'm glad. The traveler finished the last of their tea, savoring the final sip. Outside, the sky was lightening, and the rain had nearly stopped. It was time to move on, to continue their journey. But they knew that something had shifted within them. They felt a renewed sense of purpose, an openness to whatever lay ahead. Standing at the threshold of the cafe, the traveler turned to take in the scene one last time. The owner, the older woman, and a few lingering patrons waved farewell, their faces illuminated by the gentle glow of the cafe's lamps. The vintage blue car gleamed under the streetlight, and the bicycle still leaned against the wall awaiting its rider. Thank you, the traveler said, voice tinged with emotion. Thank you for the warmth, the stories, and the tea. "You're always welcome here," the owner replied, genuine affection in their voice. "No matter where your path takes you, remember that there's a place for you under this roof. And if the rain ever finds you again, let it guide you back here, where a light will always be on." The traveler stepped outside. The air smelled of wet pavement and the subtle freshness that comes after a night of rain. The clouds were parting, revealing a pale morning sky streaked with pastel colors. With one final look at the glowing sign that read "Cafe," the traveler smiled, a smile that came from deep within, reflecting a heart that felt lighter, braver, and ready for whatever came next. As the traveler walked away, the town slowly began to stir. Shopkeepers unlocked their doors. A newspaper delivery boy made his rounds, and the first rays of the sun illuminated the cobblestone streets. The traveler's footsteps felt lighter now, buoyed by the warmth and kindness experienced in the cafe. Though the journey ahead remained uncertain, the traveler carried a renewed spirit, a reminder that even in the darkest, rainiest nights, a single light could guide them to a place of comfort and understanding. Perhaps they would return to this cafe someday, when life's storms battered them once more. Or perhaps they would find other sanctuaries along the way. Regardless, the memory of this night, the music, the stories, the shared dreams would forever remain a gentle glow in the traveler's heart. And so, as the traveler continued down the quiet street, leaving behind the soft yellow glow of the cafe's sign, they held fast to a newfound conviction that no matter how heavy the rain might fall, there is always hope, always warmth, and always a place where strangers become friends, even if only for a moment. And in that brief moment, a spark of magic can change a life. So thank you, dear listeners, for joining us on this rainy night journey. May you carry the warmth of the cafe with you wherever you go, and may you always find a welcoming light in the darkness. Close your eyes now. Let the rain's gentle rhythm guide you to a peaceful rest. And remember, there is solace and unity to be found in the simplest acts of kindness. Sleep well, dream sweetly, and know that a cozy haven awaits you whenever you need it most.